The snow had started falling just before sunset, dusting the world in a soft, white glow that made everything look peaceful, almost unreal. I had spent the afternoon wrapping gifts with Lily and Max, our little hands fumbling with ribbons and tape, laughing over the tangled mess of bows. I had baked sugar cookies earlier, the smell of cinnamon and vanilla still clinging to the air, and for a moment, it felt like a normal Christmas. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe it would be normal. He was supposed to be home. Daniel, my husband, my partner in everything that mattered. He had promised me, promised our children, he would be home for Christmas. I had held on to that promise like a lifeline for months while he was deployed overseas, chasing shadows and danger that I would never fully understand. Then the phone rang. The sound was ordinary, familiar. But when I picked it up, the world seemed to tilt sideways. "Emma!" a voice said, calm, clipped, familiar yet not quite right. I froze. The mug in my hand rattled against the counter. "Daniel!" I whispered, disbelief threading through my words. "Yes," he said. But there was a hollow edge I had never heard before, a strange rhythm, a weight that didn't belong to him. "I can't come home." Something in my chest cracked. "What do you mean you can't come home?" I asked, my voice breaking. "It's Christmas. You promised. You promised us." "I know," he replied, his words measured, almost rehearsed. "I know I promised. But I can't. You need to do exactly as I say." A shiver ran down my spine. His voice, the voice I trusted with my life, was giving me instructions like I was some stranger he had to guide through danger. My fingers trembled on the phone. "What are you talking about?" "Daniel, this isn't funny." "It's not," he said. And then he gave a number. A string of digits, foreign to me, untraceable, impossible to locate. He told me to follow it. He didn't explain why. He didn't say what would happen if I didn't. And the last thing he said before the line went dead was, "Trust no one. Keep the children safe." The silence that followed was worse than the words themselves. I sank onto the couch, the phone slipping from my hand. Lily's laughter from the other room, her carefree joy, suddenly felt distant, almost unreal. I wanted to run to her, to grab her and tell her it was going to be okay, but my legs wouldn't move. I was humiliated. Humiliated because I had believed, truly believed, that this Christmas would be ordinary, that the world could pause for a day and let us have our little bubble of safety and joy. Humiliated because my husband, the man I trusted above all, was now a ghost, a voice from a number I couldn't trace, leaving me to make impossible decisions. I tried calling back. The line was dead. I tried again, and again. Nothing. Hours passed like minutes. I sat staring at the phone, willing it to ring, willing him to explain, willing the world to reset to a time when his hand would slide into mine across the dinner table, when I could feel the warmth of his presence and pretend danger didn't exist. But it didn't ring. Then came the knocks. Sharp, hard, almost impatient. I froze. The front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Not tonight. Not when the only person who should have been knocking was already supposed to be home. My heart pounded. Every instinct screamed that I shouldn't open it. I peeked through the blinds. Darkness. Just the snow swirling in the yellow halo of the porch light. But the sound of boots on the porch made me realize someone was out there. Watching. Waiting. I wanted to call the police, but I hesitated. What if Daniel's message wasn't just a warning but instructions? What if someone else had intercepted the line? What if I was about to make everything worse? Lily came running into the room, holding her tiny stuffed bear. "Mommy, can I open one present?" she asked, oblivious to the tension that hung like ice in the air. I knelt and hugged her, feeling tears slip down my cheeks. "I'm sorry, baby," I whispered. Mommy has to do something first." I didn't know what something meant. I didn't know if it would keep us safe. But I had to try. I had to protect her. And somehow, I had to survive the night until Daniel's voice, or someone who knew him, contacted me again. I spent the next hour pacing, the snow outside turning from a gentle drift to a stormy blanket. The knocks had stopped, but the sense of being watched remained, heavy as a coat I couldn't remove. Every shadow looked like a potential threat. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. And still I waited. The humiliation of being powerless, of having my family's safety depend on a cryptic message, was almost unbearable. I wanted to scream, to cry, to curse the universe, but I didn't. I sat in silence, listening to the storm, listening to the absence of the man I loved, and letting the fear seep in. It was Christmas Eve, and my heart was breaking in ways I didn't know were possible. The decorations sparkled, the cookies smelled of warmth and memory, and yet my soul felt frozen, trapped in the hollow space that only Daniel's untraceable voice could fill. I didn't know how I would survive the night. I didn't know if I would ever see him again. All I knew was this: whatever it took, whatever came, I had to protect my children. Because Daniel couldn't come home. Not yet. And the call that broke the season, was only the beginning. The morning after the untraceable call, the world outside had transformed. Snow lay thick on rooftops and lawns, muffling the usual sounds of the neighborhood. It was beautiful, if beautiful could feel so cruel. It was as though the world itself wanted to mock me, soft, white, peaceful, and utterly indifferent to the storm raging inside my heart. I sat by the window with a mug of untouched coffee, staring at the quiet street. The snowflakes fell silently, almost taunting me with their serenity. I could almost imagine him walking through it, finally returning home like he promised. But that voice, the one that came from a number I couldn't trace, kept playing on repeat in my mind, twisting reality into something unrecognizable. I thought back to all the winters he had missed, each one explained away by missions that were critical or high priority. I remember the year our first Christmas in the military town, when the base's tree was barely decorated and the artificial lights blinked weakly in the cold wind. I had decorated our tiny apartment anyway, smiling for him even though I knew he wouldn't make it to midnight. I remembered the way he would call late, his voice heavy with exhaustion, and promise he would be home the next year. But the next year, the year after that, and the one after, there was always a mission. There was always danger. There was always something pulling him away from me, from our family, from the warmth of the hearth we tried so desperately to build together. This time, though, it was different. The voice that came through that phone wasn't just delayed or tired. It was urgent, almost coded, as if every word had been measured against some invisible countdown. He sounded alive, but trapped. Alive, but restrained. Alive, but sending me warnings that I didn't fully understand. Alive, but making me feel powerless. I remember the nights before previous deployments, the ones that felt like a rehearsal for this nightmare. I would lie awake in the dark, tracing the outline of his pillow, listening to the wind scrape against the walls, imagining him somewhere in a desert, a mountain range, or a foreign city. I would clutch my daughter and our son to me, whispering prayers over their heads, hoping some invisible shield would reach him. Every deployment had been a lesson in waiting, in worry, in biting down on fear until it felt like it would break my teeth. But this time, there was no departure ceremony to mark his absence. No goodbye, no official notice, only a voice from a number I couldn't trace. Only cryptic instructions that left me questioning every instinct I had about safety, loyalty, and trust. I wandered through the house as if it were unfamiliar territory. The tree twinkled softly in the corner, ornaments reflecting the pale morning light. Stockings hung on the mantel, each with a name carefully stitched in gold thread. I had sewn them years ago, filled them with small gifts every Christmas, and yet now they felt hollow. They were reminders of what was supposed to be, not what was. The silence was deafening. Every tick of the clock seemed to echo in my chest. I could hear the faint whistle of the wind against the windows and the soft crunch of snow outside. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow seemed heavier than it should. And yet, the snow continued to fall, indifferent and silent. I thought about his hands, the ones I had held countless times, the ones that had lifted me when I was afraid, that had steadied me when I was unsure. I remembered the warmth of his touch, the strength of his embrace, and the way he would whisper that everything would be okay. And now, those hands were elsewhere. Somewhere I couldn't reach. Somewhere I couldn't protect him from what he was facing, or he couldn't protect me. I glanced at the children's toys scattered across the living room floor. They had been playing before breakfast, oblivious to the shadow looming over our lives. Lily had left a doll in the middle of the carpet. Max's toy car had slipped under the couch. I knelt to pick it up, holding it in my hand longer than necessary, as though I could will him back through some unspoken magic. Memories of past deployments flooded back, more vivid than I expected. Nights when I had called him and heard only a patchy connection, with static filling the gaps in his voice. Times when I had been afraid the line would go dead forever. Times when I had fought tears behind closed doors, so our children would not sense the storm in my chest. Every Christmas, every birthday, every small family moment had been at the mercy of his work. And now this winter, this Christmas Eve, I felt as though the snow was a mirror for my helplessness. The world was frozen, beautiful and untouched. My home, my family, my life, fractured by absence and fear. He was out there somewhere, in danger, giving instructions from a number I couldn't trace. And I was supposed to act, to protect, to survive without him. I thought about calling the authorities, about tracing the number, alerting the base, contacting anyone who might help. But every step felt fraught with danger. What if I did the wrong thing? What if by tracing the number I alerted the wrong people? He had been clear. Trust no one. Protect the children. I couldn't even trust the warmth of my own home. The snow continued to fall outside, drifting over the roof and yard, blanketing the world in quiet perfection. And I understood, in that moment, that the beauty of it was almost cruel. It was a reminder that the world would go on, indifferent to my fear, my anguish, my desperate need for him to come home. I sank onto the couch again, wrapping a blanket around myself, hugging my knees. I let the tears fall this time, silent but insistent. The humiliation of waiting, of being powerless, of watching the season he had promised to share with us slip through my fingers. It burned. But beneath the humiliation was determination. Beneath the fear, a stubborn flame. If he was out there, if he was alive, if he had trusted me enough to send that cryptic message, then I would find a way to follow his instructions. I would survive the snow, the silence, the unknown threats. I would protect my children. I would honor the promise of Christmas, even if it meant facing a winter darker than I had ever imagined. And in the stillness, as the silent snow fell around the house, I made a vow, not to him, but to myself. I would not let this Christmas break me. I would not let his absence define us. And I would find him, no matter what it took. Because hope, fragile as it might be, was all we had left. The morning after the untraceable call, the world outside seemed frozen in a cruel, perfect stillness. Snow had fallen thick and heavy overnight, covering rooftops, cars, and the little footprints of our children with a soft, deceptive blanket of serenity. I watched from the window, gripping my mug of coffee like a lifeline, the steam fogging my vision just enough to mirror the blur in my own heart. It should have been beautiful, but it wasn't. The silence felt deafening. Every tiny sound, the creak of the floorboards, the distant bark of a dog, the wind brushing against the window, pulled me back into that voice from the unknown number. Daniel's voice, familiar, yet strange, clipped, and weighted with urgency I'd never heard before. It wasn't playful. It wasn't tired in that comforting way I knew. It was precise, almost mechanical. Yet under that, there was a strain I recognized, the strain of a man carrying more than his body could hold, a man trying to protect everything he loved from hundreds of miles away. I remembered the Christmases he hadn't missed, though they were few. The small traditions we carved into our lives, hanging stockings, decorating our tree, making cookies and icing them together until sugar ran down our wrists and laughter echoed through the house. He would always insist on reading the same story to the kids before bed, always insisting that the final ornament had to go on the tree at exactly the right spot. Those memories felt like lifelines, reminders of the man I knew, even as I realized the voice on that call wasn't entirely him. It was Daniel, but not quite. It was a Daniel filtered through danger, fear, and orders he couldn't share. I sank onto the couch, holding the mug between trembling hands. The kids were still asleep at my sister's house. I couldn't bring myself to wake them, not yet. Not until I understood the situation. Not until I understood what he was trying to tell me. But each second without him, each pause in the snow's silent fall, made the reality sharper. He might not come home for Christmas at all. Deployment had always been a shadow over our lives, a constant presence lurking behind every holiday. I had become an expert in holding Christmas together alone, wrapping gifts and baking cookies, pretending everything was normal, all while listening for the faintest sign of life from him on the other end of a faulty phone line. Those nights I would lie awake in bed, tracing the contours of his pillow, imagining him somewhere far away, praying that he was safe, that he would make it home, that the wind wouldn't carry anything too sharp against his face. This winter, however, the routine was gone. The call wasn't just a disruption, it was a warning, a threat, a mystery that left me frozen in place while the snow fell like judgment from the heavens. I thought of the night before he left for this deployment. He had kissed me at the doorway, whispered promises under the faint porch light, and said, "I'll be home for Christmas. You'll see. I'll be there, I promise." I had clung to those words, repeating them over and over like a prayer. But now, the promise had fractured into a voice from a number I could not trace, leaving me to navigate danger blind, powerless and alone. The memory of the past deployments came flooding back, the ones where I had counted hours and minutes, stared at the clock as if it held answers, and prayed over the phone lines. I remembered the first Christmas without him, the bitter ache in my chest as I listened to children laughing in the neighborhood while I wrapped gifts alone. I remember the second, the third, and each year that followed, a repetitive ache that never left. And now this, the unknown, the cryptic, the threat hiding behind the familiarity of his voice, was worse than all of it combined. I wandered through the house. The tree twinkled softly, ornaments reflecting the muted daylight like tiny fragments of a happier time. Stockings hung neatly on the mantel, each bearing our children's names in gold thread. A half-finished snowman craft lay on the table, abandoned by little hands that hadn't yet felt the weight of the winter storm outside. Everything was normal, and yet nothing felt right. The snow continued to fall outside, each flake a quiet witness to my helplessness. Each flake a reminder that the world could continue in its serene perfection while I faced uncertainty that could fracture my family, my life, and my very sense of reality. I sank onto the couch again, pulling a blanket tightly around me. I allowed myself a moment to cry, silently letting the humiliation and fear wash over me. I was powerless. I had been thrust into a situation I did not understand, one where my husband, the man I had relied on, trusted, loved, was a ghost speaking through a device I couldn't trace, leaving me to make impossible decisions. And yet, beneath the fear, beneath the humiliation, there was determination. If Daniel had trusted me enough to follow the instructions in that cryptic call, then I could not fail him. I would protect our children. I would survive this night. I would follow every breadcrumb he had left for me. I rose slowly, looking again at the silent snow covering our yard, at the path that might one day bring him back to us. I whispered a vow to the cold air. I will not let this Christmas break me. I will not let his absence define us. I will protect our family, even if it means walking blind through a storm of uncertainty and fear. Because hope, fragile, fleeting, but alive, was all I had left. And as the snow fell silently outside, I realized that I would cling to it with everything I had. For him, for the children, for the family we were fighting to keep intact. This silent snowfall, beautiful and cruel, would not defeat us. Not yet. The phone sat on the counter, screen dark, silent, almost mocking me. I had called back more times than I could count, fingers trembling, heart hammering against my ribs as if it wanted to break free. Each attempt ended the same. A dead line, a cold electronic voice telling me the number was untraceable. I had never felt so powerless, so small, so utterly alone. It was as if the world had shifted on its axis, and I had been left behind, staring into a void that carried only his voice, the voice that should have been warm, safe, familiar, but instead now carried danger, urgency, and secrets I could barely grasp. I tried the police, the local authorities, the military hotline. Each time, the same response: no record of a call, no trace of a number, no indication he was anywhere nearby. Each time, my hope shrank a little further. And yet, I refused to give in. I couldn't. He had trusted me with that message. He had trusted me to act, to protect the children, to survive, and I would. I sat at the kitchen table, the phone pressed against my forehead as if I could absorb something from it. Something I could use to locate him, to understand him, to find a path through the storm he had left me in. Then it clicked. It wasn't about tracing the number. It wasn't about finding him through conventional channels. That was never the plan. He had given me a puzzle, a set of instructions only I could decipher, layered with meaning because he knew the danger would be immediate, because he knew he couldn't risk anyone else knowing where he was. It was terrifying. I opened my laptop, fingers shaking as I began retracing every conversation we had before he left. Every code word, every hidden message, every casual remark that could hold weight. My eyes scanned emails, texts, even social media posts, looking for patterns, for clues, for a breadcrumb he might have left. Hours passed. The snow outside had thickened into a storm, the world muted under a gray-white blanket. Each gust of wind against the house sounded like footsteps, a reminder that I wasn't just racing against time, I was racing against unseen threats. And then I saw it, a small anomaly in one of his last emails, something he had sent weeks before he left. A casual mention of a place, an address, almost dismissed in normal conversation. A line that seemed irrelevant at the time now screamed at me, "Keep the mailbox clear on Winter Street. Only trust the numbers I give you." Winter Street, the number he had called from, the cryptic instructions, everything aligned, as if he had laid out a trail for me, knowing that I would have to follow it, step by step, piece by piece. My pulse quickened. I called the number again, just to hear the voice one more time, but it was still dead. Nothing. Silent. Cold. And yet I felt a strange reassurance. The trail was there. He had left it. He had trusted me. Packed a small bag. Water, blankets, snacks for the kids, a flashlight. I wasn't going anywhere yet. I didn't even know if I should, but I needed to prepare. If this was the start of something bigger, if danger was closer than I realized, I needed to be ready. I needed to survive the night. And then the thought hit me, maybe he wasn't calling from a location at all. Maybe he was leaving me clues for a reason. Maybe the number was never meant to be traced. Maybe it was a test. I forced myself to breathe. In, out, in, out. The storm outside had grown stronger, snow lashing against the windows, wind rattling the doors. I could almost hear him in the howl, feel him in the cold press of air against my face. I imagined him somewhere, far away, carrying out a mission that was too dangerous to explain. I imagined his hands, steady, precise, moving with the discipline I had married, working to protect us even now. I realized, in that moment, that the number was a lifeline and a warning. He hadn't abandoned us. He hadn't failed. He had simply created a path I had to walk alone, trusting only him and only myself to see it through. By mid-afternoon, I had pieced together a plan. The clues he had embedded, the familiar phrases that now seemed intentional, led me to Winter Street, an abandoned, snow-covered neighborhood we used to pass through on family drives, empty in the cold, silent as though waiting for me. I stepped outside, snow crunching under my boots, and realized how heavy the weight of responsibility felt. Every step toward Winter Street was a step into the unknown, a step away from certainty and safety. But I didn't hesitate. I couldn't. I had to follow the path he left me, even if it terrified me to my core. And as I walked, I understood the depth of his foresight, his love, and his trust. He had left us in a place of uncertainty, yes, but he had also given me the tools, the intelligence, and the faith to survive it. I would not fail him. I would not fail the children. I would follow the trail, unravel the mystery, and find him. Because the number I couldn't trace wasn't a barrier, it was a key. A key to survival, a key to truth, a key to the man I loved and the family I had promised to protect. And I would use it. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, the storm outside had grown heavier, each gust of wind rattling the windows as if warning me of what was to come. The snow had drifted into tall, unbroken mounds that seemed impossible to cross. And yet, I felt a strange determination, a tether to the voice that had reached me from an untraceable number. Daniel had left a message, but it was hidden, buried in words, in numbers, in moments that only I could understand. I sat at the kitchen table again, my laptop open, paper scattered around me. I traced lines, highlighted words, replayed every call we had ever shared, every text, every cryptic joke he had made. He was careful in everything he said, precise even when it seemed casual. And now, for the first time, I realized he had not left me helpless. He had left me a puzzle. A coded message meant to protect us while keeping his location hidden. At first, it seemed impossible. Numbers that looked random, phrases that seemed meaningless. But then patterns emerged. Words he had emphasized in conversation. Dates he had mentioned almost offhand. A subtle rhythm in the pauses between sentences, the way he pronounced certain letters. It was like listening to a melody hidden beneath static, a song that only I could hear. I began to write everything down, mapping it out, connecting dots that only existed because I knew him. Every clue led to another, every line of code unlocking a step in the plan he had created. The realization hit me like a cold gust of wind. He was alive. He was sending me instructions, and he trusted me to follow them perfectly. I almost laughed at the audacity of it, the brilliance of his method. Only Daniel could turn a simple phone call into a life-saving cryptic map. But I didn't have time to admire it. I had to act. The first instruction became clear: Winter Street. The location he had casually mentioned weeks ago in passing. Empty, abandoned, snowed over. And yet, it held the next piece of the puzzle. I needed to be there by nightfall, just as he had said, to find the hidden object that would give me the next clue. I bundled myself in layers, coats, scarves, gloves, and stepped out into the storm. The wind whipped against my face, and snow clung to my hair and eyelashes, but I kept moving, one careful step at a time. Every crunch of snow beneath my boots felt like a countdown. Every gust of wind sounded like a whisper from him, guiding me, warning me. As I reached the first abandoned house on Winter Street, I noticed the mailbox he had mentioned. It was half buried under snow, the paint peeling, the numbers faded. I knelt and carefully cleared it away, my hands numb, my breath freezing in the air. And then I found it. A small envelope, almost invisible, tucked in the corner, wrapped in clear tape that had hardened in the cold. I tore it open with shaking fingers. Inside was a sheet of paper covered with numbers and symbols, seemingly random. But when I held it in front of me, I realized it was not random. It was a code, a language only I could understand. It matched the patterns I had identified in our conversations. Letters swapped for numbers, dates hidden in sequences, phrases replaced with seemingly meaningless words. It took hours to decipher, the wind and snow battering me as I worked under the dim light of my flashlight. But each line revealed something critical. The next step, the location of a contact he trusted, instructions to keep the children safe, warnings about surveillance I hadn't anticipated. Every word, every symbol, reinforced the fact that he had not abandoned us. He had been working even when he could not be with us, planning for every contingency, thinking of every possibility. By the time I finished, I had a clear path. I knew where to go, what to do, and how to keep our children safe while I navigated this dangerous maze he had laid out. I felt a surge of pride and fear simultaneously. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on me, but so did the knowledge that he believed in me enough to trust me with this. I stepped back from the mailbox, clutching the envelope, feeling the snow bite at my cheeks. The storm was relentless, but so was I. I had a mission now. Not to find him. Not yet, but to protect our family, to follow his instructions, to survive this night. And as I walked back home, snow crunching beneath my boots, I realized something profound. The message wasn't just about survival. It was about trust, about connection, about the bond that could not be broken by distance, danger, or deception. Daniel had found a way to reach me even when the world tried to keep us apart. That night, as I returned home, I sat by the window, the envelope clutched tightly in my hands. I watched the snow continue to fall, silent and heavy, covering the world in white. And for the first time since the call, I allowed myself a glimmer of hope. The path was not easy. The danger was not gone. But the message he left in code reminded me that we were not powerless. That even in the coldest, darkest winter, love and trust could be stronger than fear. I folded the paper carefully and placed it in my coat pocket. Tomorrow, I would follow the next step. I would continue the journey he had set for me. And I would do it not just for him, but for the children, for the family we were fighting to keep intact. The storm raged outside, but inside me, a fire burned, a fire fueled by hope, determination, and love. And as the night settled over our home, I whispered to the cold air, I will find the way. I will protect our family. I will not fail you, Daniel. Because I knew, in that moment, that the message left in code was more than instructions. It was a lifeline, a bond, and a promise that we would endure, together, no matter the darkness that awaited. The night had deepened into something almost tangible, the storm outside pounding against the house as if trying to warn me off. Snow clung to the eaves, drifting into impossible shapes, and wind howled like a creature intent on keeping secrets. I tightened the scarf around my neck, pulled my gloves over numb fingers, and gripped the envelope Daniel had left in code. Each step I took outside felt like stepping into a shadow I had never known, a world between certainty and chaos. The streetlights flickered through the swirling snow, casting elongated, wavering shadows across the drifts. Every movement in the corner of my eye set my heart racing. I knew the danger was real. Someone, somewhere, might have been tracking him, and by extension me. Every step closer to Winter Street felt like a gamble, a balance between survival and recklessness. Daniel's code had led me here, but now I had to interpret it in real time. It wasn't just a set of directions. It was a puzzle meant to test me, to push me to see threats, to recognize patterns, to anticipate danger. I couldn't rely on luck. I had to rely on him, and, somehow, on myself. The first house on the street was abandoned, windows boarded, doors frozen shut with ice. But there was a faint marking on the corner, a small scratch in the paint, almost invisible in the dim light. A sign. I recognized it immediately. It was the same symbol he had drawn in the margins of the envelope. My stomach twisted in fear and adrenaline. I approached cautiously, scanning every shadow, every dark corner, every flutter of movement in the storm. My breath came in short gasps, freezing in the air. And then I saw it, a small package tucked beneath the porch steps, partially hidden by snow. I dropped to my knees, brushing away the white powder. Inside, wrapped in waterproof material, was another envelope. My hands shook as I unfolded it. Inside, more numbers, more symbols, more layers to decode. But this time, there was something new, a warning. Do not trust anyone, it read in Daniel's familiar handwriting. Follow the path exactly. The children are your priority. You will know me by the mark I leave. The words hit me like a punch. He was close, but danger was closer. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn back, to abandon this chase. But I couldn't. Not when he had trusted me, not when our children's safety was on the line. I moved from house to house, each step guided by his hidden instructions, each discovery marked by symbols he had left in inconspicuous places, scratches in fences, paint marks, signs only I would recognize. Shadows clung to every corner, some from the storm, some from the houses themselves, but I imagined threats lurking in every one, making my pulse quicken. At one point, I stumbled into an alley, snow crunching underfoot, and froze. Footsteps, deliberate, too heavy for snow alone. Someone was following me. I ducked behind a wall, heart pounding, trying to make myself invisible. The wind whistled, masking their movements, and I waited, breath frozen in my chest. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps faded, leaving only the snow and the echo of my own fear. Daniel's code had prepared me for this. The traps, the shadows, the uncertainty. Every instruction, every symbol was a lifeline through the darkness. I realized then that this wasn't just a test of obedience. It was a test of resolve, of courage, of trust. Hours passed, the storm relentless, the world reduced to snow and shadow. But I persisted, following the path he had laid, deciphering each new clue, avoiding the eyes I imagined lurking in the darkness. Every movement brought me closer to understanding where he was, why he had left the instructions, and how I could protect the children while navigating the unseen dangers. Finally, at the edge of Winter Street, I found the last marker he had left. A small symbol scratched into a lamppost, glowing faintly under the snow and streetlight. I knelt and traced it with frozen fingers, a surge of hope and relief flooding through me. This was it, the final clue, the threshold into the next stage of his plan. I paused, looking around at the shadows, the snow, the silent world. I realized something crucial. He had trusted me entirely, even in a situation I could not fully understand. He had relied on my ability to see what others could not, to act where others would freeze, to protect what mattered most. And I had done it, but the reckoning was far from over. Each step forward reminded me that danger was real, that this path was precarious, and that the storm, both outside and inside, was not yet past. The shadows I had walked through were only a prelude to the truth I would soon uncover, a truth that would test every ounce of strength, courage, and trust one possessed. I rose to my feet, snow dripping from my coat, heart still racing. I clutched the envelope, ready for whatever came next. I had followed the code, navigated the shadows, and survived the storm so far. I had proven to Daniel, and to myself, that I could rise to the challenge, even when the path seemed impossible. And as I turned to head home, I whispered into the wind, "I will protect them. I will find you, and I will not fail." The night was still, the snow silent but deep, and for the first time since that first call, I felt a measure of control return. Not over the storm, not over the dangers ahead, not over the mystery still unfolding, but over myself. And that, I realized, was enough to keep moving forward. Because in the shadows, through the storm, in the code and the silence, our family survival depended on me, and I would not falter. The first light of Christmas morning filtered softly through the frost-covered windows. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside quiet and glistening, snow sparkling like tiny diamonds. Inside, the house smelled faintly of pine and cinnamon from the tree and last night's cookies. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe, to believe that maybe, just maybe, this Christmas could be different. I had followed every clue, navigated every shadow, and survived the storm that had seemed impossible. Each step had tested me, challenged me, and at times made me question whether I was strong enough. But now, standing in the living room with the envelope Daniel had left clutched in my hands, I felt the weight of triumph settle on my shoulders. The children slept quietly in their rooms, unaware of the danger we had just endured, unaware of the cryptic calls, the coded messages, and the fear that had gripped my heart. I smiled softly, brushing snow from my coat, and whispered a promise I had kept silently all through the night. I would protect them. I had protected them. Then I heard it, the familiar crunch of boots on the walkway, hesitant but confident, familiar but changed. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't known if he would make it, if the storm and the threats and the unseen dangers would prevent him from returning. And yet, there he was, Daniel, alive, safe, standing at the door, his coat dusted with snow, eyes scanning the house until they found mine. For a moment, we just stared at each other. No words, no explanations, just the unspoken understanding that we had survived something that had seemed insurmountable. The children stirred in their sleep at the sound of the front door, and I could feel their presence, a quiet reminder of why every step, every decision, every risk had mattered. He stepped inside, dropping his bag and pulling me into a fierce embrace. The warmth of him, the familiar weight of his arms, the steady beat of his heart against mine, it was more than I had imagined in the darkest hours of the night. I clung to him, feeling the tension of the past days, the fear, the loneliness, the worry, melt into a single, powerful moment of relief. I thought I might not make it, he whispered, voice rough with exhaustion and emotion. I'm so sorry for leaving you in the dark. I shook my head, holding him tighter. You didn't leave. You left instructions. You trusted me. That's what got us through. My voice broke slightly, but I didn't care. I needed him to know that every step I had taken, every risk I had faced, had been guided by his faith in me. The children appeared at the doorway, rubbing their eyes. Lily blinked at him, confused, then smiled. Dad, she whispered. Max ran forward, and suddenly the room was filled with the chaos and joy of our family, laughter ringing out in the quiet house. Daniel knelt, opening his arms wide. I missed you both so much, he said, voice thick. I thought I'd have to wait another Christmas. I watched them wrap themselves around him, and for the first time since the call, I felt a profound sense of closure. The messages, the codes, the shadows, all of it had led to this moment. He was here, safe, and our family was whole again. We sat down together by the tree, opening small gifts the children had left for us, each one a tiny reminder of the life we had fought to protect. He laughed as Lily handed him a handmade ornament, carefully glued and glittered, and I felt tears prick my eyes. This was why we endured. This was why we survived the snow, the shadows, and the fear. Finally, he took my hand, looking me in the eyes. I can't promise I'll always be on time. I can't promise the world will be safe. But I can promise this. I will never stop coming back to you. To us. I smiled through tears, feeling the weight of relief, pride, and love all at once. I know. And I'll be here, following your path, trusting you, and protecting what matters most. Always. The storm outside had left a quiet, almost sacred stillness in the house. The shadows of the past days seemed to lift, replaced by the warmth of togetherness. We ate breakfast, drank cocoa, and shared stories, our voices blending with the crackling of the fireplace. Every laugh, every glance, every touch felt like a promise fulfilled. As the day wore on, I realized something profound. Survival wasn't just about enduring danger. It wasn't just about codes, instructions, or navigating shadows. It was about trust, love, and the unspoken bonds that hold a family together through the worst of times. Daniel had trusted me to find my way. I had trusted myself to do what was necessary. And together, we had reclaimed Christmas, not just a day on the calendar, but a symbol of hope, of courage, of a family that refused to break. That night, as the children slept soundly, I looked at Daniel, now resting beside me on the couch, exhaustion softening the edges of his face. I felt a deep, unshakable peace. We had faced uncertainty, fear, and danger. We had followed codes, decoded messages, and walked through shadows. And yet, here we were, together. I pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath my fingers. "Merry Christmas," I whispered. He smiled, eyes closing, leaning into me. "Merry Christmas," he echoed. We made it. And in that moment, I knew we had. Not because the storm had passed, not because danger had disappeared, but because we had faced it together and survived. Because Christmas, after all, isn't just about a date or a gift. It's about finding your way back to the people you love, no matter the odds, no matter the shadows. That night, under the quiet glow of our tree, with snow still blanketing the world outside, I realized something else. Even when the odds are against you, even when the path is coated in mystery and danger, love will guide you home.